When Painkiller released, it lived under Serious Sam's shadow just like how every first-person shooter after Doom was a Doom clone for a while. In the case of Painkiller and Serious Sam, there aren't many other games that fit the one versus many frantic shooter genre. It rings true today as it did back then, as shown in an interview with Adrian Hirmilash, co-owner and game designer at People Can Fly at the time, and the many comparisons to Serious Sam by reviewers and the community, so much so that you're likely to see its name come up whenever Painkiller is talked about. Adrian was aware of this, however his attempts to give Painkiller its own name didn't work out, as the comparison stuck. If there's anything for certain that the two games share, it's a disorganized story. The introduction cutscene starts off with zero context with anything. In both the manual and the back of the box, they only give a brief summary of what the premise of the game is. Someone needs to raise hell against its minions, and that someone is you. The most useful part is the main character's name, because it won't be mentioned in the game until the end of Chapter 1. The cutscene shows Daniel taking his wife, Catherine, out for dinner on her birthday.
Dinner reservations are at 8.
Oh, I can't believe how hard it's raining. We sure picked a great day to celebrate my birthday.
Oh, it's just a little rain, little dry. Anyway, we'll be there in no time.
Happy birthday! I hope your reservations were at Hell's Kitchen. At first glance, I had the impression that Daniel took her out, but not for dinner. We have this awkward stare that even she gets confused with him.
What?
Laying his hand on top of hers to really make it weird. Not to forget that he's doing this during a heavy downpour and at night. Yet when you slow down the footage, you can see the van change lanes to crash head-on with their car based on how their headlights move. There is the possibility that Daniel was the one who swerved his car, but it's hard to tell since he's blocking the view of the steering wheel. Going off of the street's layout and the perspective of the camera during the collision, it seems like Daniel stayed in his lane. The damage is focused on the driver's side, based on how the frame around the windshield is more distorted on that side compared to the passengers. So it wasn't a completely direct head-on collision, despite how it looks at a first glance in the cutscene. The other driver does appear to be more in Daniel's lane, yet I wouldn't put much faith in this view as visual perspectives can be elusive. Despite how the evidence slightly leans towards Daniel not being at fault, it's still overall inconclusive due to Daniel's negligence. It's anyone's guess as to why this happened, a drunk driver, hit job, or whatever, but maybe there is more to it. There are no other clues within the game besides possibly one theory. In interviews, Daniel is said to just be a regular guy. However, there is one that adds on that he has a somewhat less than saintly past, which could mean anything, like the only bad thing he has done was not returning a library book. This helps explain why he would get sent to purgatory and a possible motivation for someone to kill him, such as a very vengeful librarian. Still, this doesn't explain why Daniel does that awkward stare and laying his hand on top of hers. I'll get back to this soon. Then it jumps to the cathedral that we'll play through in level 4 of chapter 1 with an angel that hands Daniel a map to go kill 4 of Lucifer's generals so that he can see his wife again. Daniel does not know what he did wrong in his past to deserve purgatory, nor will he get an answer. He also argues that he was pure, and the voice actor may have been given the wrong direction for the tone of his voice in that line.
Do this, and you will be pure. I was pure? So you say.
His insistence that he lived a pure life could indicate that he is a man of faith, but you don't have to be Catholic to end up in purgatory, so that's ultimately undetermined. They do mention how Daniel has been in purgatory for a long time while fighting demons, hence why he was chosen to be Heaven's hitman. Hell is preparing to launch an assault on Heaven, so God wants Daniel to act as a low-profile agent to eliminate Lucifer's generals to avoid sparking the assault sooner than they want. The angel gives Daniel a potion that he claims will help him survive.
Drink it. It will help you survive.
More on that later. Just know for now that I believe the potion allows Daniel to absorb demon souls to recover his health and strength. The game doesn't clarify what that potion is or even if Daniel drinks it, so it's left up to theory. I'll come back to this when it's more appropriate and with greater context. I do wonder what their plan would be if Daniel never died. Given how he's adamant that he's pure and heaven is holding Catherine away from him, I have a hunch that God caused their deaths as he may have seen Daniel's potential as a hitman. God may have told Daniel that he and Catherine will die in a car crash that night. That then explains why he does that awkward stare and holds her hand. I can't imagine anyone doing that while driving unless they knew they were about to die, especially in those conditions. He could have resisted, although if God wants you dead, I don't think there's much that he can do. So he might as well stay faithful to avoid going to hell. In hindsight, he was damned either way. He sure does work in mysterious ways.
He has his reasons, and he doesn't have to explain them to anyone.
With the exposition out of the way, it's time for the gameplay.
I live again.
Whoops, wrong game. It's not clear from what was given at the start, but Daniel will be traveling and fighting through Purgatory, despite the levels being based off of places that we see on Earth. Purgatory, as it's typically known as, is a Catholic idea. It's defined as a place of temporal punishment for those who died in God's grace that haven't been cleansed of all of their sins. It's not a place between heaven and hell, but a place to be purified before entering heaven, like taking off your shoes before entering a house to avoid bringing in dirt. That doesn't sound as cool, so the game takes the more dramatized view of Purgatory being a place between heaven and hell, as well as to set up a potential invasion between them, with Purgatory as the intermediary. Despite that, it implies that Daniel does have some sin left over in him while Catherine was completely pure, but we're never going to be told what he did wrong, or if God had a hand in making Daniel a hitman. It's also quite fitting that the gameplay starts at a cemetery. Prayers to the dead are believed to expedite the process for those in purgatory, such as All Souls Day, where Catholics hold Mass, pray, and visit the graves of their loved ones to honor them and to hopefully help them get through purgatory faster. Game-wise, starting here works in two different ways. The first being that we just saw Daniel die, despite the time skip, and a story detail about graves that we'll see later. Painkiller's level editor swaps the placement of Chapter 1's Level 1 and Level 4, the cemetery and cathedral respectively, so at one point the cathedral would have been the first level. This would make sense, since that's where we last saw Daniel in the first cutscene, so it works better for continuity. There are some other changes in the order of levels, such as Chapter 2 also moving its Level 4 to the start, and Chapter 3 containing some of Chapter 4's levels. They don't seem as impactful as Chapter 1's change, since there isn't much tying them together in the first place. The starter weapon is the Painkiller, which has 4 different attacks. Its primary fire is a lawnmower shredder and the ability to shoot the spinning blades outward. It can be a bit janky with the hitboxes, and the blades don't do any damage when it returns, which is a shame, so that boomerang attack isn't very useful. The primary fire is okay, but considering that the vast majority of enemies do melee damage, you'd want to keep your distance. The secondary fire, the Killer, is much more useful as you can spam it to hell and back as it kills most enemies in one hit. The alternative to the secondary fire is to launch the Killer at a wall or any stable foundation and hover your crosshair over it to create a laser beam. Enemies will just walk into it, making it thrive when they funnel in from one direction and no one's shooting at you. In practice, this attack isn't very useful as you don't want to stand still, and it's rather difficult to keep your crosshair centered on the Killer while strafing around. With the standard secondary fire being the only decent attack of the Painkiller, it'll most likely be forgotten about during combat, especially since you obtain the shotgun mere seconds after starting the game. But before moving on, the secondary fire does have a cool trick. If you stand on top of an object, you can use the Killer to grab said object and launch yourself in the air. It helps with grabbing some secrets, and it's fun, even if doing so is not required. It's also fun throwing enemies around with the Killer. The physics of this game is very enjoyable, from enemies flailing all over the place, getting thrown into the air at random, and piercing monsters to the walls with the stake gun. It's very janky, yet that just adds to the fun. Unfortunately, it makes it incredibly frustrating for anyone who's a completionist. Souls, which serve as +1 pickups unless it's from an elite enemy whose soul's worth +6, spawn from dead enemies at the location of their corpse. That corpse could end up in an inaccessible location because it got flown outside of the map or it got stuck in the air. It's not that big of a deal if you're not going for 100% completion. There are some souls that are unobtainable through conventional means, which makes me question if they ever intended the game to be 100% completed, if there wasn't the free and unlimited golden cards usage for doing so. They do serve as your main source of health, as traditional health pickups are uncommon. It can keep stacking too, pushing your health into the 300s or even 400s. Souls also serve as a plot point. More on that later. The developers used the soul system as an immersive alternative to traditional health packs. We'll notice them try to make Painkiller stand out by putting in unique mechanics as we continue. Blazing a new trail does incur some risk that it may not work out as intended, and unfortunately I believe that's the case with the soul system. It's not bad, and it can work. Doom 2016 uses a similar modified system with its glory kills, spewing out supplies among the viscera. Painkiller, however, has a few things that don't quite work out. The souls take a while to spawn, meaning that the player may have to wait around to pick it up after a fight, or loop back around to it during a fight. It's missing that instant gratification and encouraged aggression to get in there and start ripping the enemies to shreds. They tend to stick together due to their simple AI, so those souls will be hard to reach among the wave of bodies. Souls disappear on a short timer too, without the tarot card to extend it. This then incentivizes the player to lure them away from the souls and bunny hop in to collect them before they disappear. Put this all together, and you end up with a scenario that looks like this. Bunny hopping around the arena to collect souls while hurting the other enemies around until killing a batch of them, to continue hopping around to collect their souls, and so on and so on. Of course, there's nothing that's forcing you to play this way. It's just the way that is incentivized by how the game plays, whereas a Doom 2016 glory kill instantly rewards the player for being aggressive, so that they can go on killing again. Painkiller feels more like a race against the clock to collect that reward, while possibly ignoring enemies to do so. Besides health, collecting 66 souls enables a demon mode for a short period of time, where you can spam the left mouse button to blast away monsters. It's okay. It automatically happens when you collect 66 souls, so it can occur at inopportune times. It does have story implications, the same as the souls themselves, but more on that later. If you notice that no souls are spawning, props to you for picking the highest difficulty option. For some reason in the Black Edition, the trauma difficulty mode is available from the start, while it used to be locked off. It's still the case for the DLC Battle Out of Hell, making it rather strange. Play on Nightmare mode or lower first, but I'd recommend Nightmare. Painkiller isn't a hard game since most of the monsters use melee attacks and you have a gun, and the ability to bunny hop away that serves as your main movement system. Most of the damage I've taken throughout the campaign came from being reckless with explosive damage, which can really hurt. There are some difficulty spikes, but they do flatten back down afterwards. While we're on recommendations, I suggest turning up your mouse wheel sensitivity to the max, otherwise switching weapons with it will be on a significant delay. The second weapon, the shotgun, is a blast. The ragdolling and bodies flying everywhere makes it satisfying to mess around with. If you're more into jibbing, the shotgun doesn't disappoint with bodies blowing up in a cartoonish way with all the limbs detaching and flying off in a cloud of red mist. Unlike the Painkiller, you'll most likely be using the shotgun throughout the entirety of the game. The only thing that holds the shotgun back is its damage drop-off at medium to long ranges and relatively slow rate of fire when the amount of enemies on screen increases later in the game. Its secondary fire keeps it relevant in the late game when it's better to use the chain gun because it enables killing elite enemies in one shot. Most enemies in Painkiller die within 1 or 2 hits, as they're usually just fodder. The elite enemies require some focus to kill them due to their larger health pool, but the shotgun's secondary freeze fire makes them shatter in one shot like the rest of them. It helps keep the pace of the fights fast and gives it a purpose. Otherwise, the freezer is useless given how everything else dies so quickly. Other enemies can kill frozen ones, which is a nice detail. Another thing to note is that you'll want to use up any ammo that you get within a level. I don't like how they did this, but you start off every level as if you started it from a level select menu rather than as a continuation from the level before. You'll still have whatever weapons that were given from the preceding levels, however your ammo, health, and armor will reset to a base amount. This also means that all of the secondary ammo that you've picked up is gone, which is given uncommonly until the late game. It made me question the point of searching for secrets or topping off on extra supplies when I'm going to lose it all at the end. I'm no better off if I searched around than if I went straight from the start to the end, as long as I could handle everything within that level. Combine that with how trying to collect all of the souls can be a pain from earlier, and Painkiller ends up being a potential cure for your completionist urges. This soft reset is made worse with how most of the levels don't follow any continuity. You end up in different locations between the levels that don't make a whole lot of sense on how you got there besides chalking it up to teleportation, which just begs the question of why we can't teleport straight to Lucifer's generals. The chapters at least follow a loose theme, like Chapter 1 is Gothic Horror, 3 is Industrial, 4 is Medieval Crusade, and 5 has a figurative theme that isn't apparent on the surface. Chapter 2 is just a mess. You go from a prison to an opera house, a mental asylum, a snowy bridge, a plague-ridden town, then finally ending it in a swamp. It gives an impression, to me at least, that this game is more like a series of map packs than a campaign. The only levels that matter at all in the story are the final levels of each chapter where you fight a boss, so basically the ones with a cutscene attached to them, and level 4 of Chapter 4 for story reasons. The gameplay doesn't integrate well with the story besides the act of killing the generals and absorbing demon souls. You could just watch a compilation of the cutscenes and not miss out on much. This disjointed nature is why I'm going to talk about the game in broad strokes and focus on particular parts of the levels based on how interesting the discussion on them will be. Before moving on, I have to at least mention the tarot cards. I'll go more in depth later, and for now just know that you can unlock a tarot card at the end of every level by completing a challenge. They give either an active or passive ability that you can equip with the use of gold before entering a level. Gold is collected from broken objects, secret holy items, and from enemies. Gold has no other use if you don't plan on using any tarot cards. Level 2, the Atrium Complex, doesn't have much besides 2 things. There are 2 paintings, Saint Michael fighting demons by Master of the Legend of Saint Ursula, and The Last Judgment by Jacob de Baker, which only the right panel of the triptych is shown in the game. The first one reflects what Daniel is doing, fighting demons. It does raise a question as to why Saint Michael, an archangel who fights against hell, doesn't participate in this current one in purgatory. The first being that heaven wanted this operation to be low profile as told in the first cutscene, so having a prominent angel be the one attacking Lucifer's generals would raise instant alarms. Second, it could be possible that having Saint Michael lead the attack could fulfill the prophecy of the Great Tribulation. The Great Tribulation is a time of suffering and death that could be seen as the end times, and when Saint Michael will arise to fulfill his role on behalf of God. Ironically, this is told to a different Daniel in Daniel 12:1, whose name means God is my judge, but otherwise has no relation. In the game's terms, the Great Tribulation is a war between heaven and hell, as the verse mentions a time of trouble, so to avoid the war is to avoid the end times. Keeping Saint Michael away from that confrontation helps to avoid setting off that spark. Since this game appears to base itself on a mix of Catholicism and Judaism, as we'll see throughout the campaign, we can take a look into the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which is a book summarizing the Catholic Church's doctrine. In paragraph 667, we can see the Great Tribulation referenced as the final Passover, which will end in, quote, God's victory over the final unleashing of evil, end quote, and, quote, God's triumph over the revolt of evil, end quote. I can reinforce that with paragraph 680 that states, quote, the triumph of Christ's kingdom will not come about without one last assault by the powers of evil, end quote. If heaven is destined to win, then why delay it? In the last cutscene of Painkiller, a demon named Alistair talks about how hell could have invaded heaven ages ago. However, Lucifer was too cautious and wanted a larger army to ensure victory. This could be the ramblings of a bloodthirsty demon, but there might be some truth to it. Heaven seems reluctant to face the forces of hell head-on, given how they're relying on Daniel to assassinate their generals. If they were to start the confrontation, it may show that heaven is weaker than they appear, leading to a hellish morale boost and eventually them steamrolling over heaven. The Great Tribulation could be a separate, future event from this game's perspective, or it's possible that it could be this current tension where heaven would win the war but at a great cost. Fate is better interpreted in hindsight since you can't really tell if this current event is what's prophesized or how things will happen between now and what's destined to happen. As you can imagine, a first-person shooter game isn't going to divulge many details about its story. It also casts a lot of this stuff aside as the story progresses, in favor of focusing on the personal tale of Daniel killing the forces of hell. We won't know why or much of any of the inner workings of heaven, which is fine. A story doesn't need to tell everything, and it's not like it's a plot hole that needs to be addressed. The verse right after the one mentioned earlier, Daniel 12:2, tells of resurrecting the dead to everlasting life or shame, which could be hinting at the Last Judgment. The Catechism certainly does, as it states the Last Judgment being the form of God's triumph over evil. The other painting portrays one part of a larger picture that showcases the event. A resurrection of all of the dead occurs, and then the second coming of Jesus judges all to either be cast down to hell or up to heaven, depending on how they lived. This isn't the only time that the Last Judgment is featured within a painting, as we see it again in the Asylum level in the same fashion of only showing a zoomed-in piece of the larger picture. In that one, it's zoomed in on Haran, the Greek psychopomp who transports the damned to hell. The larger picture is the Last Judgment, painted by Michelangelo, found within the Sistine Chapel. It is a bit ironic that it's zoomed in on Haran, and that the event is preceded by the resurrection of the dead, because we learn later on in a cutscene that the demons are using graves to escape hell and get into purgatory. For the record, I can't find any reason as to why the other Last Judgment painting is focused on the right side panel. It shows the wife of the person who ordered the painting and their 6 kids, along with John the Baptist hanging out in the back, in case you're curious. Still, the grand scheme of the paintings fit Daniel since his mission will dictate the outcome of his judgment, lest he be stuck in purgatory for eternity, despite the Catholic belief of it being a place of transition. Although I guess it doesn't specify how long someone could take to become pure to enter heaven, so it could very well get delayed or declined if someone acts out while waiting. I'd imagine in the game that they'll just get killed by the invading demons and get their souls consumed. There are a bunch of different artworks within the game, but they are front-loaded, with the majority of them being within chapters 1 and 2, with some sporadic sightings afterwards, such as the palace level in chapter 4. Some have meaning to them, others are just there to look pretty, and a few are nice details, like the green man or foliate heads within the Cathedral level, since they're usually found within Christian churches. I will only be discussing the ones that have something to talk about, like the previous two. For example, there's the fresco depicting Christ Pantocrator, also known as Christ Almighty, the ruler of all, back in the cemetery, or the Dolorite painting by Pieter Bierhol the Elder in the Asylum level showing a Flemish folklore Viago leading an army to pillage hell. They're neat and are sometimes tangentially related, but there's not much to analyze. The Atrium also shows off a strange enemy mechanic. There are monks who, instead of trying to hack down the player, throw their axe and immediately die in ragdoll. It seems like a bug, like they're hurting themselves from the projectile because of some hitbox shenanigans or something, but no, that's their intended design. It happens again in level 4 of chapter 1-2, or any other time an enemy loses their only weapon. So instead of giving them an unarmed attack or just pulling out another weapon, the developers just made them ragdoll and die. I don't think the inherent jinkiness of the physics engine helps the impression that this mechanic gives off, since that seems like a logical cause if it was a bug. Although there is one issue in the Catacombs. The Bane of PewDiePie. This bridge feels impossible to cross with how it acts like a spastic waterbed. I tried many different methods to cross it, from bunny hopping, normally walking across the edge, and jumping over the first few planks. Those seem to cause the bridge to have a seizure every time, like the weight of Daniel causes seismic waves with every step he takes with his thunder thighs. This is version 1.64 by the way, I'm not playing on any early launch build. The bridge did everything it could to prevent me from progressing by phasing me through it, flinging me into the air, and putting a new meaning to walking the plank. I'm surprised it never crashed the game. In the end, I just had to get across by jumping at the middle of the bridge, then getting across the other half as quickly as possible before I got flung or splattered. There is a simple fix to this, and that's to open the console and type /set max FPS 60. Limiting the frame rate leads to a worse blur effect when hit, like the frames per second looks like it takes a nosedive even when it actually doesn't. This blur effect happens if the FPS is capped or not. There is a quick and simple fix that I'll link to in the description. It removes the blur effect entirely, which honestly needed to go away in the first place. It's not uncommon to see older titles using the Havoc engine go haywire at uncapped FPS. The monsters can sometimes have spasms too. They're mainly visual besides possibly placing their soul in an unreachable spot, but they are kind of fun to watch. It's also fun seeing an enemy get penetrated by a wooden shaft. The stake gun is a weapon that I would like to use more, but it just isn't practical. As the game continues, more and more enemies start to populate the screen. Its fire rate just can't keep it up. You can find it here normally in level 3 of chapter 1, but it is available in a secret in the previous level. Sticking enemies to the wall with the stake gun is a nice use of the physics engine and a very satisfying one. Unfortunately, it doesn't pierce through multiple enemies. This and its slow fire rate really hamper its use against large crowds. Its secondary fire, however, makes up for that, at least until you get the chain gun rocket launcher. It's a grenade launcher, which is self-explanatory. I recommend directly hitting an enemy with the grenades since they explode on contact. If they don't hit anything, they explode on a long enough timer that any enemies would have moved out of its vicinity. The stake gun mainly serves as the medium to long range weapon throughout the entirety of the game, and as the crowd eraser with the grenade launcher until the rocket launcher is obtained. Considering that it is your long-ranged weapon, the drop-off on the stakes are a bit short, but you might adjust to it as you use it more. The same goes for the grenades. Their arc feels short, like it doesn't have much power to it. The stakes at least do more damage once they reach a certain distance and catch on fire. They kill most enemies in one hit anyway, making it not much of a useful function. There are usually a lot of explosive barrels lying around the arenas, especially in the early game, so you could stick to just using the shotgun. Most of the enemies will be too close for comfort for the grenade launcher, and you can just herd them towards an explosive barrel to take care of them. It is possible to shoot a grenade and hit it with a stake to turn it into a faster, deadlier grenade with more range, but it's not worth trying to do since it's just overkill and a bit tricky to pull off during a fight. Save that for your MLG montages. This level also features a very odd inclusion. There are mini-bosses in levels 1, 3, and 4 of Chapter 1, then they're just gone until they make a one-time return in level 2 of Chapter 4. It feels like they either came late in development or the developers simply forgot that they are including them. I differentiate the mini-bosses from the elite enemies since the elite ones are just tankier, uncommon enemies and don't have any spectacle to them. The one in level 3 is more like a puzzle, a very tedious puzzle. Luckily for me, I've played this game before and remember this part. The mini-boss is immune to all forms of damage, and you instead have to shoot at these boards on the ceiling to let in the light, which will shatter the monster once you can manage to bait it into it. Those planks aren't the easiest thing to find. There is a star there to hopefully draw your eyes to it, but it's roughly the same color as the boards due to the lighting, with the only clue being the tiny specks of light when you directly stare at it from below. Valve's developer commentary on Portal mentions how most players will not look up without some sort of prompt.
One bizarre fact of game design is that without some serious prompting, players will rarely look up. In this case, the prompt is a ladder. Most players will investigate where the ladder goes, which is up. The ladder actually falls apart as soon as it's touched, but by then it's served its purpose.
There usually isn't anything interesting above the player besides a ceiling or a skybox. Unless there's something moving in the sky or you just want to take in the view, there's not much of any reason to look up in the first place. Allowing more light to pass through the planks with just enough to make the player curious would solve this fight's issue of not knowing what to do. It's a strange thing to say for a puzzle, but this is a first-person shooter game, and this is the first and only time this mechanic is used. This isn't the last time we'll see one of these one-off puzzles with an obscure solution. If the player isn't frustrated enough from trying to figure out what to do, getting the mini-boss to actually get into the light will make it worse. It feels like you have to stand on the very tip of that stone plank for him to get close enough to touch the light. If you jump away to the ladder on the side too early, his pathfinding will immediately make him turn the other way. That ladder almost feels like a red herring, as I usually have better luck standing my ground and letting him hit me. It comes with the risk of getting knocked into the fire below, but that's only a quick load away to fix. You don't have to worry about health or armor since it's going to reset in the next level anyway. Otherwise, you might spend minutes repeating the same motion over and over trying to get him to walk just one more step into the light. Needless to say, this doesn't come off as a well play-tested fight. While we're at it, the next mini-boss found in level 4, the Cathedral, isn't anything to write home about. It may come off as a regular boss since it has a health bar, but it's not one of Lucifer's generals. The only two things that make it a mini-boss are the health bar and its spectacle. You can ignore him while you fight the regular enemies or really do anything else. The most that he'll do to you is shake your screen around and throw rocks if he has a clear line of sight. Stick to the perimeter of the arena and there's not much that he can do. There are a few enemies that shake your screen, which does get annoying. One of the main offenders is the skeleton with a shield, as they will flick your view upwards regularly if it's in range. The worst is yet to come, however, as we'll see at the end of this chapter. Before then, there is some theological discussion that needs to be done here. At the end of every level, there is chanting and what I assume to be a portal opens up. Thanks to a Steam discussion post, we know exactly where this chanting originates from. It's from the Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts' Dhamma Suna album, released in 1997 from the Yamataka track. This isn't to be confused with the Mandala Offering track from the Tibetan Chants for World Peace album, which sounds very similar but are different. The latter was also released in 2008 while Painkiller was released in 2004. Their website claims, quote, "The Tibetan Buddhist chants on this album had never been recorded until 2001, when Grateful Dead's Mickey Hart brought the Gryoto Monks Tantric Choir to his California studio to record the incredible multiphonics of their sacred rituals." End quote. So while it could be possible that the recording made its way to People Can Fly's studio, it is clear that their statement isn't completely true. Plus, the one that it actually originates from is titled Yamantaka, which matches the mantras that they are chanting. Yamantaka is a name for 3 different Buddhist deities, but what's more relevant is the actual practice of it. Yamantaka means, quote, "the one who puts an end to the Lord of Death," end quote, which sounds pretty metal. In simpler terms, it's a meditation practice to overcome being unaware when experiencing death, and to get a subtle amount of mental activity to help break samsara, or the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. My interpretation is that it's like trying to lucid dream, where you're aware that you're dreaming to take control of your mental activity, but for death. In Daniel's case, it takes Yamantaka's name literally towards the end of the game. Lucifer isn't necessarily the Lord of Death within Catholicism, but he did cause death to be a thing in humanity by introducing sin, as we can see in Wisdom 2:23 and 24. Quote, "For God formed us to be imperishable. The image of his own nature he made us. But by the envy of the devil, death entered the world, and they who are allied with him experience it." End quote. In other words, humans were supposed to be immortal, but Lucifer was envious of Adam, the first human and man created by God, and tempted Eve, the first woman created, into eating fruit from a tree that God forbade eating from, who then shares the fruit with Adam, who eats it as well. Thus, they committed the original sin and were cast out from the Garden of Eden, losing their immortality. In a way, Lucifer is indirectly the Lord of Death for bringing sin into humanity. In regards to the chants within the game, I'll admit that I have some difficulty understanding what is being said. It's an intended design of the tantras, as they are meant to be secret, and the Dalai Lama claims that the ordinary eye can't perceive them anyway. so I guess I haven't achieved that enlightenment yet. It is something that can be learned, as it was found not to be intrinsic to someone. I don't think that we'll find some profound truth in regards to Painkiller within these sound bites. Still, I didn't want to leave it at that with the possibility of there being more that we could figure out. I tried contacting the Kyoto Foundation located in California, the same one supported by Grateful Dead's Mickey Hart, to help me learn about these chants, but I never received a response. Understandably so, since their website states that possibly only one of the monks is fluent in English and that monk has many responsibilities. In case you're curious, I didn't link my YouTube channel in the email because I was afraid that they would see a video like the world's first wet dream detector and back out. If they did, they obviously never learned about Martin Luther King in school by judging me by my titles and not by how much of a banger those videos are. Instead, I managed to find the estimated timestamps for the in-game chants in their original sources. I've provided both the source and the in-game sound clips, along with some of my notes in my references document linked in the description. If you happen to know about this type of stuff or find out anything more about it, I encourage you to share your insights as I am curious about this. The first of Lucifer's generals, Necrogiant. I had a visual glitch where he had an outstretched tether connecting him to another realm. It seems to be a common issue from looking at other gameplay footage on YouTube. I like to imagine that it's an Evangelion and that's its power cord. It's a fairly straightforward boss that you just have to shoot to kill with supplies scattered around the arena. A common problem with the bosses in this game is that they aren't that difficult by themselves. It's the environment that screws you over. Circle strafing and lining him up with the shotgun will work all day, but when one piece of rubble or some other obstacle stops you in your tracks, that's when you're in trouble. The tombstones here, or possibly one of the skeleton grunts, will get in your way, which can give the boss an opportunity to hit you. And for this boss, that's not a bad thing, since it tests your spatial awareness instead of just shooting it to kill. I cannot extend that to two of the other bosses, however. Those ones really suffer from how cluttered the arena gets, but we'll get there later. The only real problem that I have with the Necrogiant is his ultimate screen shake earthquake. That is just disorienting, and it gets to a point that I never thought was possible when the tornado crosses your path. Maybe that visual glitch is his connection to hell, where he pulled this godforsaken effect from. I'm sure it's nauseating for some people out there. Although if that was the developer's goal, then I guess they are truly innovative by pushing the bounds of interactive entertainment. I recommend going for the tarot card challenge of killing it under 2 minutes just to minimize the potential of dealing with his screen shaking. Thankfully, that's the last that we'll see of the egregious screen shaking. In terms of biblical implications, the Necrogiant doesn't seem to have any. The giants mentioned within the Bible, such as the most well-known one, Goliath, were more like really tall people. You would have to look at the titans within Greek mythology to find a creature like this, which isn't what the game derives its inspirations from. It seems that the Necrogiant is an original creation made by People Can Fly. After each chapter is a story cutscene, and just like the level transitions, how Daniel got there isn't explained. Some make sense, but others are entirely different locations from where we just were. Chapter 1's cutscene is where we meet Eve and see the game's intended audience. As discussed earlier, Eve is the first woman created by God in the Garden of Eden, and was cast out for the sinful act of eating a fruit that was forbidden by God. She was persuaded by the devil, so it's most likely that she still harbors some discontent with him. That would explain why she knows so much about Lucifer's armies and generals, as she mentions in the cutscene. Another reason could be that she wants the devil's powers to become the ruler of hell, as shown in the final cutscene of the expansion, Battle Out of Hell, and has been waiting for a chance to absorb his soul. Other than that, there's not much else that's relevant about her within the Bible. She is stuck in purgatory because of that original sin, also confirmed by the expansion's final cutscene.
To save me. A soul whose fate was decided when the Earth was still young and new.
No sin is too great to be forgiven.
Of course, that's not for you to decide. Now is it?
Yet she refers to other humans as mortals, as if she still has her immortality from the Garden of Eden. She outright says that she's human with this line,
We don't have time for games, Daniel. You can feel I'm human.
What do you mean by that? Do you know that he has a stiffy or something? The Bible has an answer to this. Angels don't really have a physical body and are spiritual, meaning that what we see is more like a projection. We can see this in the chapter 3 cutscene when Daniel blows off the angel's hand. The Bible also says that demons are fallen angels, so the same concept can be applied to them as well. Instead, we can hurt the demons in the game, unlike the angel, so that we can have a game in the first place. When Eve says that line, it means that Daniel can actually feel her, while an angel or a demon would feel like nothing. It's still odd that she regards humans as mortals, like she's not one of us.
Some mortals seem to have trouble grasping the notion that they're no longer alive.
Maybe mortals refer to more than just humans like all of the other animals. The Bible is rather vague on what happens to animals aside from humans after death. Instead, it's probably because she had a close connection with God during her time in the garden and was once immortal, giving her a heightened sense of herself. If you're wondering where's Adam, we'll get to that later. For now, the Bible doesn't say much on the matter, and the game doesn't either. Eve provides a lot more help to Daniel and us in regards to answering questions. She reveals that Daniel has been dead and stuck in purgatory for 30 years, explains how dying in purgatory works.
While you wait, your soul can be taken by a demon and sent to hell. If you fall to a demon, you will go to hell.
And that Lucifer is using graves to transport his minions from hell to purgatory. She also explains that it takes a long time for Lucifer to form a soldier, giving a reason as to why Daniel has been able to fight demons for 30 years without a full-scale war between heaven and hell yet. So far, so good in answering questions about the story. I do question why Eve and Heaven aren't collaborating on intel, as she does point out outdated information on Daniel's map.
And I'm telling you, your map is no longer correct. Give it.
They are still on good terms, as said in chapter 3.
Ah, you've met Eve. She's a good ally to have. She can be trusted.
Still, they don't share information. She may have developed disdain towards Heaven after all this time stuck in purgatory. The expansion clarifies that her sin has never been forgiven. It wouldn't be unreasonable to think that she wants to become the ruler of hell to wage a war against Heaven herself. Regardless of all that, she is immensely more helpful than the angel from the beginning, but not even she knows why Daniel is in purgatory despite living a pure life, and suggests that it must be something from his past.